The council representatives today are Councilmember Tim Waters and Councilmember Susie Hidalgo Ferry. We're ready to get started. Susie's going to start off with going over the parameters for today. Can you all hear if I do this? Kind of? Okay. So we will repeat the questions. The council members will repeat the questions. And then if you all need me, I can jump in whenever you want. This is scheduled for an hour. And Susie?
Okay. Good morning. I am Councilmember Susie Hidalgo Ferry. I represent Ward 3, the northwest little corner of our community. So I just wanted to, we do have a packed house. So we really want to be able to hear people's comments, concerns, questions. So for this, because of the size, we're going to limit to one. First, we want to hear all the topics, and then we can circle back to an item that is the same topic. And after everyone who's been able to talk about their subject matter can address that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. And we're thinking 3 minutes, 3-minute time frame as far as you're getting your comment out and being able to respond, so we can hear as many people as possible.
There's a sign-up sheet up front.
And there is a sign-up sheet up front, so if you had not had a chance to sign in, please do so. If there's anything I forgot, go ahead.
You covered it. We're ready to go.
Okay.
Who wants to start? Shaquille.
So I think one of the things that drives attendance at these meetings and also a lot of civic activity and civic engagement in the city is the fact that everyone knows that change is coming to Longmont. Mm-hmm. Population is going to grow, more people are going to want to live here, the cost of housing is going up, our transportation infrastructure really doesn't meet the needs of the city for the future. And in order to adapt to those kinds of changes, we're asking for a lot from our city government. And that's not just elected officials, it's also the city staff. And what that means is that we need the ability to plan things, we need the ability to respond to requests from people for variances so that, for example, we can facilitate the kinds of development that we want to see in the city, which might be high density, it might be lots of different types of creative development. And one of my concerns is that I'm not sure that the city has the resources that it needs to do that job. I learned recently we have something like 1.5 full-time traffic engineers in the city. If the city's going to achieve Vision Zero, as the council is asking it to do, that's really not enough traffic engineers. I'm sure that there's similar shortages in the planning department. I'm sure there's similar shortages in a lot of the staff departments in the city. And I'd be curious to know what the council plans to do in order to address these resource shortages and make sure that our government can respond to our needs in the way that we need it to.
You have any recommendation?
Yeah.
Everybody hear the question?
Yeah, that was good.
Raise my taxes, please. I'm not kidding. Please raise my taxes.
Yeah.
So the number of concerns kind of restated kind of our growth trajectory and all that's associated with it. And are we adequately staffed throughout the city to address those challenges? Is that a fair summary? And then the comment was, if it means raising my taxes, then raise my taxes was the other comment. I'll make a comment and then I'll.
Yeah.
I don't think the issue really, Shaquille, in terms of staff, maybe it's taxes and revenues, but we allocated $414 million of your money in this year's budget. There'll be carryover. So by the time we get to the end of this year, based on how our budgets are structured, we'll probably have a $700 million budget ultimately in 2023. I don't think our problem is we don't have enough money. The question is, what are our priorities and how best to spend that money? And if we had all the money in the world, is the talent pool deep enough and available enough for us to staff? So if I were to point out from Tim's perspective, the places in the city where we are short-staffed, for whatever reasons, I think the planning department would be one of those. I can guarantee you our parks department would be another one of those in terms of, what's backlogged and the staff we need to get stuff moving. But that's really less about, maybe parks is about finance in terms of staffing. But so much of it is just about the workforce right now and who's available and who's willing to work for municipal governments and, what are the options, right? So I think workforce hasn't settled down since the pandemic. And I don't have there's no easy answer here. There is no doubt where this city and every city is going to continue to confront all the issues around land use and infrastructure and, safe health and safety, not just in terms of transportation, public safety and, all that goes with it. So I acknowledge these are real challenges. I wish the solutions were easy, but you're identifying kind of what the edge is for us, and we're going to continue to confront it every Tuesday after Tuesday. The one kind of maybe personal commentary I would add, we get a lot of, as you can imagine, incoming emails. I could just give you example after example where many people have opinions, strong ones, about what we ought to be doing as a city. And at the end of the day, decisions are going to be made because we have sessions like this, input from the community, we have a competent staff, and then you have 7 amateurs elected to serve the city as city council members. Here's Marcia Martin. Marcia has strong background she brings from her professional experience. So, I'm going to defer to Marcia on a whole bunch of issues, Susie on a bunch of issues. But the truth of the matter is I'm not going to defer to either one of them at the end of the day on what's the right direction in terms of big policy. I'm going to do the best I can to take what we learn from staff, what we hear from the community, what we're going to do on our own, and try to put that together to make a responsible decision. But the last thing you want are 7 amateurs making decisions that we're unqualified to make.
Yeah.
We're going to have to take that input. We'll listen carefully, but we're going to rely on staff as well. I mean, we're in this, I could go to a long list of examples of topics where it's like, you don't want us making that decision on our own. We have to do it in concert with the folks who are giving us advice.
That's why I'm worried about whether or not we have enough staff to provide council with the information that it needs to make decisions. I certainly would prefer that as many city staff as possible live in the city boundaries, because I think that's good for the city environment. But if part of the problem is a talent pool and there's a traffic engineer in North Dakota who wants to draw a street plan, I think we should let them, and we should consider remote workers as well.
And we are. We're doing more and more of that.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned a lot of the points that I was going to mention, especially around conferring with staff. They are the experts. Long after we're gone, they're going to be here. So, we depend on that piece, but the driving factor of our conversation is what we're hearing from community. So it's a matter, just even my short time on council so far, there's been a lot of pivots. We have this idea, we're going to go this direction. Then we hear from community or some of the consequences of some of our decisions. It's conferring with staff, backtracking, and reevaluating where we're at, making reflections, and make adjustments accordingly. So that means looking at our budget, as well as, finding the right talent pool that's out there. There could be applicants who are not qualified or we don't want in our, we don't want running this particular department. We have to be able to say, no, we're going to try again. And so it takes a little longer. It's been a struggle to find people. So we could put all the positions out there, but if there aren't the people to fill these roles and do it adequately, then, we're kind of in a bind. So we're kind of readjusting and calibrating as we move forward.
So ahead, yes, sir. Right there in the hat.
John Tillman, 1303 Spruce. Question for you. I know we're Boulder County, the state of Colorado is looking at a historic increase in property value assessments, right? In the Boulder County, it's 35%. So that's a lot of money, right? I think the state of Colorado collects over $1 trillion a year in real estate taxes. Can you educate us on how much of that historic increase that we're all going to bear in real estate taxes, how much of that trickles down to the city of Longmont? Because that could solve some of our problems, right? If I don't know what it is it $1 million, 10 million, 50 million? Because it's coming, and we're all curious as to how that's going to be spent.
Yeah, well, we're all curious. This was the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment, which provoked this. I don't know that it's going to generate more money. Actually, it's a shift in the burden. As I recall, commercial property has been 29% versus 7% in terms of, the rates at which we're taxed on our real property, on our, for mill levies against real property or on real property. It's the shift that's occurring to residential real estate, and I don't have all the details. We're learning as we go on. I'm reading in the newspaper. We knew what was going to come as a result of the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment. Now it's here. It's my understanding there's still a potential legislative fix that occur. I don't know what it is. The legislature has a few more days. I was down there yesterday, just observing, and they have a couple of days left. I think that the 8th is the last day of the legislative session. I think there's still a chance, but I cannot, I'm not the expert enough. I don't know if Jim Golden was here, our chief financial officer, whether or not Jim. Harold, do you have any insights on it?
Oh, yeah, I do actually. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So we do know it's gonna add a fair bit of revenue. To Councilmember Waters' point, what we're concerned about a few things in this. One, we don't know what the legislative adjustments are gonna be, so we are waiting on that. It could be, potentially around $5 million of additional revenue. The challenge that we have with this is we also know that property tax can be a bit fickle in the way that it's done here in terms of the ratios and how they adjust them. And so we have had recent years where we've had reductions in property tax as we move through. So Jim and I have already actually started talking about this. It could be an option to fill some of the holes on the staffing perspective that we have. But we also have to be careful that we don't get too aggressive on that, so that you look 2 cycles down the road and all of a sudden it's reducing in, and then now you have a different budget issue that you have to deal with. So we're going to be working the numbers and understanding what the risk profile is as we talk to council on the budget, and some of it we may want to treat as one-time funding. That way we can help manage our risk, and so we started that conversation when we got the numbers, because we literally got the numbers from the appraisal districts at the same time that it was in the newspaper. So it could be part of the solution, but we have to be careful because we do know we've had reductions in property tax. I think we had one last year. And so, and the value that came in. So we're going to work that, and you'll hear more about it in the budget process, but hopefully it is a pressure relief valve in what we can do from a staffing perspective. Because to the point that we said to them in the council goal setting session, we're just now getting caught up to pre-Great Recession staffing standards because of some of the challenges we had to deal with.
Yes. I see a hand there. Carol.
Hi, this is directed to you. A few years ago, I heard you speaking, and one of the things you said is, instead of having the developers just meet code, we should have them envision better codes and better ways to do things. Can you give me one example of something that might fall in that category?
Yeah, I was heard to have said, Cheryl heard me say one time, the term, God, I hate doing this sitting down, you can't see people. Is that okay?
Yeah.
The term, I think, is exceptional benefit as opposed to extraordinary benefit was the term in the ordinance. There was a time in the Longmont ordinance for ordinances regarding annexation, where a proposer, a developer, an applicant, was obligated to describe what the exceptional benefits would be to the city if we were to annex property. The applicant, the value of property goes up exponentially overnight. We annex it, it's way more valuable. So it's a reasonable expectation that if we're going to do that, there should be some exceptional benefit to the city. Somewhere in the past, that language came out of the ordinance. So it's no longer a requirement. But doesn't mean it's not a question we can't ask. So when an annexation comes along, one of my questions is, why would we do that? What's the exceptional benefit to the rest of the city if we're going to annex that property in your interest, right? So I could give you a couple of examples. A developer comes along and says, we'll build you a community that's net zero in terms of carbon emissions, right? where this is gonna be a totally sustainable, in terms of power generation, community. We're gonna build you a community with childcare center, right? In an HOA, or whoever's gonna manage this property to contract, but we're gonna give you the space. I wish every development that had been approved in Longmont for 50 years would have required childcare space. My bias, but it would create capacity that doesn't exist today. Those are two examples. There are others regarding the environmental concerns, best and highest use of land in terms of live workspace, to reduce transportation requirements. It's those kinds of things. It's not a formula. It's not one thing. It's a reasonable question to ask, and I think it's a reasonable expectation to hold. If somebody's applying to have their property increase in value, that there's a reciprocal that we ought to be expecting in terms of benefit to the community.
Perfect,
That's
thank you. That was towards you, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes.
There's another one over here.
Yes, my name is Don Weigel. I've been a resident of Longmont for over 50 years. There's three of us here. We're looking to seek an ordinance change or increase to allow a safe haven baby box to be implemented in the fire station. I would like to introduce Rick Sadler, who is familiar with it, and also Whitney Vaughn back here, who is also, so I'm gonna take my 3 minutes.
Okay.
A lot of you may wonder what a baby box is. Baby box is a safety device that legally permits a mother in crisis to safely, securely, and anonymously surrender if they are unable to care for their newborn. A baby box is installed in the exterior wall of a designated fire station or hospital. It has an exterior door that automatically locks upon placement of a newborn inside the baby box, and an interior door which allows for a medical staff member to secure and surrender newborns from inside the designated building. There are currently 134 baby boxes in 9 different states. 23 of these infants have been anonymously and safely delivered to Prestrel via the boxes since 2017. I'd like to render the rest of my time to the president of
Colorado Safe
Colorado
Haven.
Safe Haven Bill.
The Safe Haven law is a national law, and Colorado's interpretation has been in Colorado for 23 years. In those 23 years, we've had 72 safe surrenders via the Safe Haven law, and we're just here simply to ask for the next step of this law, which is the tangible box. And an important item to discuss is that when a parent comes to surrender the baby out of box, there's a number they'll call. That number will still encourage them to do a handoff transfer to an employee at either the fire station or the hospital to maintain the highest level of safety for the child. The estimate for this box is $16,000, and Colorado Safe Haven for Newborns, the Colorado chapter of the Safe Haven law, is willing to fundraise all money needed for the box. We think Longmont is a prime location for it because of the ease of access to Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, Greeley. We just think it sits at a really great place in the state, and we're hoping to partner with Longmont to bring Colorado's first baby box.
Thank you. That's wonderful. So with this, because I heard you say an ordinance change, Harold, would this require an ordinance change, or could this be something that's handled internally?
I don't think it would require an ordinance. I think it could be internal.
Okay.
And just contact me via email, and I'll put you in touch with our public safety chief, who can then look at this and work with staff in the hospitals, because we do have a really strong working relationship from an EMS perspective, so.
And since it's not an ordinance change, we just want to make sure we're going the right routes. We're planning on attending that city council meeting, but maybe that's not necessary, and it's just.
Just call me. You want my number?
I do.
303-651-8601. Eric is my assistant, and then she may be the one helping you connect. But just ask to speak to Erica and talk about what we discussed today.
Okay, thank you.
So I did see a hand over here. Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question about what the city guidelines are to include public parks, public open space in the new neighborhoods that are being built. I've lived in Longmont about 15 years, and the parks just stand out as raising quality of life. 20-year-old, 30, 40, 50-year-old neighborhoods are either located near open space or have public parks. So what are the guidelines the city is following to continue that?
Let me take that.
Go for it,
Okay.
yeah.
So I won't get the percentages
Yeah.
accurate, I'm sure. Let me just give you the kind of the general requirements. Every proposed new development, residential development, is required to address landscaping, including recreation space. And based on the size and the setting, it may be a pocket park, it may be a neighborhood park, and oftentimes it's, in fact, in most cases, the developer is purchasing, whoever's proposing a project, they purchase the land and then deed it to the city. So I'll just give you an example. Fox in Ward 1, from the day I was elected, Fox Meadows, who lives over by Fox Meadows, the sign that says, "This is the site of a new school and a new park." It's been there forever, that sign, right? Well, the good news is, well, here's just the reality. I'm going to give you more information than you want. Do you want me to do that?
As much as you want.
Well, anybody who knows me knows, don't do that, Tim. Don't start down that path. But the reality is we're behind the curve in terms of park development. Not in terms of acquiring space and not in terms or land or allocating money for park development. We have like $18 million the councils have approved over time for park development. The problem has been recovery from the flood in 2013, right? That has put all of our park development behind the curve. That doesn't mean that in places like Fox Meadows, Dry Creek Park on the west side of town, I mean all over town, a developer says, here's my application, I'm going to purchase this land, I'm going to deed it to the city. Now it's up to the city to decide, what's the right schedule for, developing that land. Our problem has been trying to catch up with recovery. So Harold put together with his team, and I've whined about this enough that, and I'm not the only one, I think, that's whined about it, but we are taking a whole new approach to park development this year. It's kind of a test to see whether or not we can get smart enough to use a methodology called best value. Mm-hmm. We're using outside contractors, et cetera. But here's the point. That land is purchased, it's set aside, it's dedicated. Sometimes it's a community park, which is like 70 acres. So Montgomery Farms at the corner of 66 and County Line Road 1, Dry Creek Park on the other side of town. Those are large enough parcels. And the Twin Sisters, just right adjacent to the new park by Indian Peaks Elementary School, are all set aside to be community parks. I mean, to serve the region, compared to a neighborhood park, which is like Lanyon Park, which would be a neighborhood park, or Collier Park, as opposed to a pocket park, which was just something much smaller within a multi-family dwelling project, something like that. But we understand how this community values its parks. There'll be no less commitment that I could ever foresee in Longmont to protecting that kind of space and developing it for use by families and in the larger community. There are times, this is just kind of a based on an email I got yesterday. There are times where people look at undeveloped land that was purchased and dedicated to be a park, yet it has not yet been developed. Look at that and see it as open space. Now we start to talk about developing that piece of ground, and the view is that you're somehow developing on our open space. When indeed it's not open space. It wasn't purchased with open space dollars, it was purchased for the purpose of being a park. I got one of those emails yesterday on Dry Creek Park. This council should protect that as open space, was the message. It's like, well, it wasn't purchased with open space dollars. It was never intended to be open space. It's been in the master plan since 2008 to deliver a park to the west side of town. So the word we gave to the community, we're going to keep our word. That was my response. So clarity on how we purchased the land, what fund the money comes out of, and what the intended use was initially is really important in this consideration as it moves forward. Just know that everybody is frustrated that we are not on the kind of schedule we'd like to be on to deliver to the community those amenities, right? With that knowledge that there's a whole new approach being taken this year. You'll hear references, if you were showing up in council meetings, which I wouldn't necessarily advise you to do, because you all have a life, you'll hear references to the 8 in 5. That's 8 priority projects that we're trying to get out the door or through the queue within the next 5 years, right? Now there's another 8 or 10 park projects, maintenance projects behind that, but it's a high priority. We're testing a new approach this year, and you won't see any, I don't think ever in my lifetime, see less commitment to that kind of amenity in this community than you've seen in the
They
past.
don't even have to be groomed parks.
And there are, there are parks, there are different levels of recreation activity, some low impact, some higher activity, the intention in terms of what the parks, how the parks are developed.
A good example of that would be Rogers Grove.
Yep.
It's a combination of a small groomed area and that lovely path along the river and just
Great example.
natural ground cover
Yeah.
and trees.
That's an example of a low impact recreation as opposed to high impact recreation. It's a greenway as opposed to a park. And we make those kinds of distinctions as well. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
So I'm kind of to follow up on trip mark line 2007 Red Cloud Road. I've been a resident in Longmont since the mid-80s. So I was surprised to see it coming out of a February meeting that we're already short millions and tens of millions of dollars for some of these projects in the pipeline already. I think you mentioned maybe 8 projects that are priority. The city visioning documents are quite ambitious. The Longmont's going to be the greatest village in 20 years in the world. It's going to take some
I'm
money.
going to add one piece to that, but keep going.
It's ambitious. As far as priorities go, now we're looking at maybe 3 ballot measures for rec center, branch library, and an arts and entertainment center. How do you pay for it all? Because taxes are necessary for services, but some of us just can't keep paying anymore.
Susie, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. Hey, Trip.
Affordable housing, so people can live here.
Absolutely. So, it was interesting. So, this sounds really loud.
Yeah, it does.
It's my voice is go on. No, I'm not doing that. So, my entire term on council, I've noticed, well, right away I got in and it's COVID. But it was looking at our infrastructure, our city building, our public safety building, our library. Like there were major flaws in the infrastructure that needed to be repaired that actually should have been repaired decades ago. And, readjusting and having to, pivot, we have to take care of this necessity. So what we're really looking at as a community is looking at how we can pick up the flaws that we're not things that we're not taking care of right from the beginning that should have been taken care of decades ago. So, we're trying to put all that together. In the meantime, moving our city forward as far as amenities, looking at things for our youth to engage in. I was involved in a project with my class with the Growing Up Boulder, where they got to do the redesign for the sugar mill and for the sugar factory. And overwhelmingly, just from our 8-year-olds, they're looking at places to live. And it was like, and even just how this next generation of kids are thinking. They're thinking, well, if we build these homes and they have the yard, that's expensive. Let's put the houses on top of these our stores. So they've created this kind of town center and looking at things for kids to do, exploratory museum, interactive virtual reality. They're looking at all these different spaces. So as we're thinking about what the community is going to look like, we're trying to plan for what the community is going to look like 50 years from now, as far as taking care of the major issues that we have to take care of now. I noticed I remember that meeting because I was shocked at the price tag. And looking at inflation and how much that has impacted. And what are we as taxpayers, putting into the mix where my home state, we were charged the wazoo for everything, but we also had neighborhood parks. We had things. We had a cultural arts center in the city of Escondido. And I remember the pushback when that first happened. It was in the 80s, and people were, well, we don't need that. But now it's become a center hub for people who don't have access, who would normally have access to music, to culture. There's parks and so there's a potential that we have in our community to bring for the future, as well as what do we have to do that's going to impact everybody's in and out today. And it doesn't give you a whole lot of how we're going to pay for it, but it's really asking the community to all kind of, let's band together and let's start setting these priorities. And we're working with staff, we're hounding them all the time. Grant opportunities, other federal funding, finding all these different ways that we could assist in funding these. And even with that public-private partnership, there was some great news that we heard at our last week council meeting around a possible collaboration with the Y. So getting creative, thinking outside the box that we can bring that price tag down for you all, along with providing the amenities that our community deserves and our future deserves.
Can I just add two thoughts? The first, you made reference to a vision statement. Envision Longmont, right, the master plan. I don't know, compared to other cities, how aggressive or ambitious it would be. It kind of lays out, a vision for the city. But the specific vision statement you were referring to are one of two vision statements that a previous council developed and this council has refined and re-embraced. One is a vision for place. A second is a vision for people. And the reference you made was the vision for people. So let me just add one little part to that may not matter to anybody else, but it matters to me. The vision is that we would be the greatest community in the world in which children could be born and raised. That's an important part of this, because it speaks to our intent to make certain we're addressing the needs of children. And the last part of that vision too, it addresses people growing old into seniorhood, like me, right? It's really an attempt to say we're paying attention to the needs of every segment of our community, through their lifetime in Longmont. Now, if that's ambitious, so be it. I think it's a reflection on what a value that we hold. Beyond that, there is no doubt, wherever we end up, at least in Tim's opinion, wherever we end up with questions about that go on the ballot or don't, I'm not certain where what we'll end up putting on the ballot. But I can tell you there across this community, there are people who are very enthusiastic. In fact, would be very disappointed if we don't have a performing arts center question on the ballot, a recreation package on the ballot, and at least the library expansion on the ballot. And there will be a large percentage of this community that will say, kind of what we're hearing this morning, are you out of your minds? There's so much uncertainty with respect to property tax and what the balance is going to be. We all know the cost of living is a huge burden. In Boulder County generally, in Longmont, probably not as much in Longmont actually as in the rest of Boulder County if you look at housing costs. But that's the tension, and the tension's going to be there all the time. It's going to be a real tension this fall if these things end up on the ballot. And at the end of the day, the decision we have to make is whether or not we're willing to say to the community, you decide. This shouldn't be we shouldn't be judging winners and losers, or that the arts community gets to vote and the rec community doesn't. Put it out there. Let those folks, it won't be a matter of what we decide. It'll be a matter of how well advocates in this community pick up the issue and can persuade their neighbors that it's worth the investment. Now, that's a judgment call we have to make. And I don't think we are of one mind on the council about how many questions to put on the ballot. But at the end of the day, that's going to be the tension point. Do we put them all on there and let the public decide? It's your money. It's your city. You decide what the priorities are for you, and then we'll figure out what to do as a result of that election. Or do we not put options on the ballot? Because members of the community have said, don't expose us to the risk of somebody else voting to raise our taxes. That's the tension.
So, yeah, Tim, yes, those things are desirable. But these other projects that are in the pipeline already that we don't seem to have the funding for, as a community, I think we've already agreed, silent railroad crossings, for instance. And of course, Burlington Northern has a lot to do.
Oh, we,
Yeah, they do.
quiet zones, we do have we are budgeted and we are staffed. That's BNSF that's slowing us down on quiet zones.
Well, and Trip, you know budgets, because we were on negotiations together. Certain funds are allocated for certain departments in certain areas. So, they're not necessarily coming from the general fund, but money that is allocated for that particular project. You know what, I saw his hand up first, and then you'll be next.
Lance Whitaker, 1750 Collier Street. As you all know, I've been one of those ones who have not had a life and shown up at many of your councils.
I didn't mean to be, we appreciate that, Lance. I didn't mean to be disrespectful.
And a lot of the things that you have been discussing, a lot of you don't know is that Centennial Pool, which is right over there, is in critical need of all of you to gather together to save. Because we are going to lose that pool. It's going to dry up if we don't get together and find the proper funding and the proper support from the city, not the council, but the city has to bond together to save that pool before it goes dry. Now, many of you have probably gone to schools or other things where you've been bussed into that pool to learn how to swim. Well, think of your children when they don't have that swimming pool to swim in, because it's dried up and now has become a volleyball court. So, as a city, we have to bond together and make sure that the funding that these 7 council members and mayor can properly allocate those funds to go to that pool. And maybe, abandon the arts center a little bit. It's a new center. It's beautiful. Museum. It's beautiful. Brand new. But places like Centennial Pool are literally crumbling the walls. So it's up to us as a city to band together and put that money where it needs to go. So us as a city have to become more informed on what the projects that council are being addressed with. So just to let you know, Centennial Pool may not be there in 2 years. You may be playing volleyball in a pool.
So, Rick, did you get your question answered? Because I don't think so. I feel like there's more.
I'm fine.
Okay. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all gonna be voting on it. So, what direction we wanna go as far as, the ballot.
Centennial Pool's closest to my home.
It is. And there's, we could pull together, we could talk a little bit more about that, but.
Well, Taylor, I think you're next.
Yeah, we're good.
Well, yeah, so I'm hearing a theme today, a lot of money, and we don't have money. And then I want to have like a little caveat of the story of we do need more staffing. We do need to support our staff. How I got my start in my career, I was 18, a summer seasonal for parks. did that for 4 summers, and then that jumped me into something. But they hired 25, 30 kids back then. I think they hired 3 now. And then also, obviously I have a history with the city with my father, but knowing a little backstory. But I'm hearing a common theme of money, and we need to find revenue. And, if you recall, my little study for downtown, just property taxes, I bet you anything, if we look at value per acre, jobs per acre are higher, tax or sales tax revenue is probably higher than any of the bigger box store developments that we do, and we do give them money. So maybe we need to rethink where we put our investments, and maybe rethink our development code as well, and allowing that mixed use neighborhood almost everywhere, so that small business owners can have a better start, or maybe someone needs to start a business in their front yard so that they can even afford their mortgage. So we need revenue. Mixed use zoning produces more revenue, so maybe we need to put our investments properly to actually build that
We have
money.
expanded our mixed use. Go ahead.
Well, do you ever hear the comment? Don't tell me if I'm summarizing this accurately.
Yeah.
That the suggestion is we take a look at what we do with zoning and land use code to become to incentivize or encourage more mixed use development. Is that fair?
Which, and would also lower our transportation needs.
Yeah, I mean,
and
it
infrastructure
solves a
needs.
number of problems in terms of revenues, revenue generation per acre for a developed area. I mean, there's all kinds of urban planning work that's been done that documents this. The truth of the matter, my view, and I'm a neophyte, but as I look at our definition of mixed use, we have the broadest definition of mixed use I can possibly imagine. I don't think our problem with mixed use is the definition of mixed use or what we're willing to do. It may be that we need to rethink incentives. But I think the biggest challenge, and this has been a flashpoint for the council over time, the biggest issue in my view with regard to mixed use is what we've done with the part of the ordinance that limits a percentage of a mixed use development to be residential, right? Our ordinance, and I don't agree with this, it is just the law. Our ordinance on mixed use limits residential development in a mixed use property or project to 50% of total built environment. I don't think there's a developer in the world that would propose a mixed use development and limit arbitrarily the development of that project, limit to residential development to only 50% of it. That, in my opinion, is a way bigger challenge or obstacle than the definition of our definition of mixed use or what we're willing to incentivize. Now,
Well, I would throw that in there is that we don't need to focus on new development. We can focus on what we already built.
doesn't matter. It's if you're limited to 50%. If you can't.
Yeah, so that has to change.
Well, I need to qualify this. It's the 50% is limited based on how a developer is going to finance their project. It's how they finance it. I should have added that. Otherwise, I'm confusing it badly. But somebody who wants to develop a mixed-use project, and depending on when they want to finance the project, is limited to 50% of that to be residential property. That's a non-starter for most developers. So I don't think anybody would disagree with you in terms of the value of mixed-use work-live properties, and all, especially along our mainstream or our business corridors. And maybe it's a matter of incentives for us to get more interest on the part of developers. And we certainly have been willing to incent economic development in town. So I'll stop. I'm going to confuse it even more.
Well, and we're in constant conversations with the staff around what are the challenges. So, we have a particular ordinance and requirements, and then as projects come in or lack of projects, it's just reevaluating. What do we need to do? What changes do we need to implement in order for us to get really what we desire in Longmont? So it's just conferring with staff and having these discussions at council to guide. But those are, I think you brought up some good points about, and we're constantly thinking about those things as well as we're moving forward. Go ahead.
Right behind.
The one thing I wanted to say is the council did change the code where we do have the flexibility to build that in. 150 Main is a good example of where they can do that. So the code gives us the flexibility. It really is on the financing side where you start running into issues, and it's actually the commercial side sometimes that is causing the press more than the residential because of filling commercial space. And that world's just changed dramatically. So that and that's where you work with the developers and trying to understand what are really the triggers and how do you approach it, how do you approach the world.
I think what I'm also pointing out is a homeowner. So, like, I have friends live at 6 and Bill, and that used to be a little corner store. That's not allowed anymore. There's, so there's also residential and also homeowners can also be created, not just developers.
Yeah.
And we've restricted the zoning code through, 50 years of misuse. That really limits our finance growth and limits livability for a lot of people.
I saw a hand though,
Right
over
behind-
here,
right
and then there's another one way in the back, and then the.
Right here, and then Tom. Let this.
My name is Monty Meduna. I live at 1933 Ashford Circle, and I think I have a question. I'm not sure what it is, but it has to do with public-private partnerships. And I've got this thought process where it may not be popular. I'm not a proponent of a lot more taxes. I think one thing that COVID did is when the federal government unleashed trillions of dollars, it created kind of a wish list mentality at all level government and with people. And if you don't think $32 trillion in national debt's not going to be a problem for us someday, it's going to be a problem. But, and that's why I'm wondering if there's not public-private partnerships that could be used whenever possible. I mean, I like the idea of the arts and entertainment. I love an idea where a group says, we want this, we're going to raise half the money for it. I love the baby box idea. I would almost guess that there's enough people in this community that would easily kick in money to provide an option of baby boxes as compared to abortion. I think there's a place for that. I am a train horn hater, and and I would throw money in outside of taxes to make train horn whistles go away. And so I guess what I'm really kind of wondering about is it seems like those things maybe have happened, this public-private partnership. Occasionally, I don't know the history in Longmont. Like I said, I love that idea for the arts and entertainment. Is something like that, could you start almost doing that widespread for stuff, right? For the people that really want stuff, whatever that might be, to say, you know what, we'd love the city to do this, we're gonna bring in a bunch of the money to make it happen. I don't know, how often does that happen? It could have happened more.
I know it's happening a lot. As far as the success rate, I'll defer to Harold, but that is one of the means of, if there's a way that we could get creative with how we're funding, so we're not totally depending on taxpayer dollar. Go ahead. Add anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly chasing those opportunities. I think where we're seeing a lot of it right now is in the housing world. So when you look at what we're doing in terms of, and I'll talk about it from the housing authority's perspective, which we also are all part of. Historically, they would fund and build a single property on their own, and so they weren't able to produce a lot of projects. So we took ARPA dollars, we took affordable housing dollars, and we're partnering with development arms that bring in a significant part of the capital stack to build it. So we're reducing the value that we're bringing in, but we're actually able to create more projects and produce more units for affordable housing. So today we have about 89, 88 units being constructed on North Main. We're about to close and construct on another 55 permanent supportive housing units adjacent to the suites. And then we're in design on another project on 17th and Holbrook for affordable family housing. So what we're doing is we're minimizing the dollars we're bringing in, we're partnering with these private companies to get these bigger projects done. So we're routinely chasing it to see what's out there. In some cases, there's just not anything out there, but when an opportunity presents itself, we're taking it. And so we've got a lot of these.
So could we start an office of public-private partnerships and hire 10 people? That was a joke. But like for really a lot of things. So like I've been in the Optimus Club for years, and Optimus Club has raised money for 3 fire safety houses in the history of Longmont, right? So could there just be an avenue where for just a lot of things, if people say, you know what, we want the city to get involved, we want to do this, we'll raise the money, a lot of the money. I mean, just because right, the housing development, that's a pretty big deal, right? That's a big monstrosity to do those things. But even just for everyday stuff. I don't know.
We do have that, so the museum's another really good example of where you have friends of the museum, so if folks are interested in the museum, they can contribute to that. So council allocated a piece of, or a section of funding. They then received $1 million from a private donor. I think there's more coming, and then the friends are kicking off their campaign.
That's great.
And so within our various operational groups, we have friends groups that are associated with the library, the museum. We started one for the youth center. So as folks are having those ideas, if it's specific to any operation, you can come in and we'll point you to the appropriate friends group. That's really that mechanism for more of the local private bringing dollars in.
All right, thank you.
Perfect. And then back
Tom.
there, and then this woman up here.
Morning, my name's Tom Smith. I live in Champion Greens on the west side of town. I've got carried in an email that I got at 8 o'clock this morning that I'll just briefly overview. I gave it to Dr. Waters, a neighbor who came down with COVID in the last few days from his grandkids visiting, excuse me, raised some interesting questions that are way above my pay grade. He's a former insurance adjuster and FEMA administrator who was also assigned here during the flood and has some experience, chose to come back here in retirement, has done some reverse engineering calculations on affordable housing and has a number of questions I can't answer, but I pose to you what he provided, and Dr. Waters has this, that working backwards, I can't explain the formula, that it would take about, I think he said $457,000 to buy a house based on the median incomes and the affordable things, would get the buyer a 1,400 square foot house. I did a quick search on Zillow or Realtor.com today. There was one house in Longmont that would fit for that. So I'm not sure how all of those things will go together to help solve some of our problems, but it is an opportunity certainly for us, and it will be a big challenge, I think, coming into the future. Now, we live next to a land that's in this unique opportunity for development. And we had a meeting with the developer here a couple weeks ago, and he's now projecting that the townhomes there will, when they're finished in a couple of years, will probably be $900,000 to $1 million. So, and he's proposing the affordability factor is worked into those. So that'll be interesting. Now, what my question is, and I would say Harold and I have had some direct interaction dealing with another opportunity for the city and put this down for more money to spend. Some of you know I've had some challenges in the last 14, 16 months getting information and accurate information from the city. And it deals from the databases, the record keeping, and various things related to, and in most cases it was zoning and planning type things. Dr. Waters and I, Councilor Martin and I have had some different discussions about what information is available. Mr. Dominguez and I spent half an hour one day at his computer, and I started to think maybe the IT people had restricted his access because we couldn't pull up a map that the developer had submitted in a plan to show some property ownership. And there are some inefficiencies. If you go in to look up a city code this morning, find it, write it down, decide tomorrow you want to go back and look something up, it may actually have a different coding number because of how that process works. There are all sorts of opportunities. I looked up a map, shows our subdivision with 15 houses color-coded differently than the rest of it. Planning's yet to be able to explain that to me. in October, I think it was, I asked the city council, based on the information they get, what do they consider valid? How do they make accurate decisions, informed decisions? And that, I think, gets a little bit to the point of much of what we're talking about here today, that we do need to support that function so that good decisions get made as we go forward, and we do make decisions that will provide good outputs. That having been said, I've had a number of interactions with Dr. Waters going back to our NGLA days, and I would add to it pats on the back. A couple of our moments go back to, you might remember, caught a city employee doing something right. And this week I caught 2 city employees doing something right. Okay? Stay in your seats. Okay? But I had one of these IT-related problems. I was looking for the records on our subdivision, the historical records, how things came in. And I would compliment Justin DeHarsh, an analyst in the Planning and Development Services, and City Clerk Don Quintana. And after maybe a 2-week quest and about 10 or 12 efforts, they were sending me things to try. They finally got the IT part straightened out. Yay, that works. So it worked well. Thank you.
Thanks,
And
Tom.
Marcia is signaling 3 minutes, and Marcia, I would
Yeah,
say,
so,
we don't have those
You
many
got it.
firefights you mentioned at the last.
You got it, so I'll let you handle that. You've referenced you a lot.
Well, Tom and I have a little history together. So, I think the only thing I would say is, there are no perfect institutions. And the city of Longmont is not a perfect institution, but it is populated by a bunch of folks who are really dedicated to serving this community. They're highly competent. Their interest really is in making your lives as productive as they can be. So, whatever inefficiencies, whether it's IT or codes that we have to keep working on. I honestly had no idea when I was elected to council the quality and the commitment of the people in this city. So you gotta be proud of it.
Okay, and then.
Boy, Tanner's wife, right there.
Yeah.
Now, her husband happens to be an arborist. He's our arborist. Where'd he go?
He's with our child.
Oh, he's with their
Yeah,
caretaker.
they went to go play.
If you need an arborist, Tanner Weiss is really good. Go ahead.
That's true. Played in Baptist care.
Yeah, go ahead.
Put that out there. My name's Laura. I live at 1040 Pratt. So we are sandwiched in between 9th and 11th. Wonderful little neighborhood. We've lived in Longmont for 10 years. My husband and I were both born and raised in Boulder County. So we've seen population growth and all the changes that have come to a wonderful community. And one of the big concerns that I have is traffic and keeping the streets safe for pedestrians. We walk a lot. We walk along 9th and we walk along 11th, and they're both really quite scary, especially with a small child. This is my first time at one of these meetings, so I don't really know what the process is, but figuring out ways to continue to keep the streets safe for people who want to access the parks or, walk on the sidewalk without fear of being hit by a speeding car. And I think those are things that, with raising a young child, really has been a concern to me.
Did everybody hear this?
No.
Can I
Please.
summarize? Susie, you want to summarize? You summarize.
Okay, so it was in regards to, and let me know if I miss it, if I skip anything. It is in regard to traffic safety, speeding cars, and the challenges it brings for pedestrians, especially our little ones, our kids. So, how do we go about getting some of these roads just in a more safer condition? I worked with a couple of residents early on. I think it was over in Old Town area where we got the light put on. Just running a traffic study. Naming that intersection, that point that is hazardous, and then the process is that there will be a traffic study done to keep track of the number of speeding cars, that what's the average in that point, and then the traffic department does come up with suggestions or ideas on how to minimize those impacts. And I know us as council, we've been moving forward on the Vision Zero. philosophy or structure that we'd like to see in our city as far as really putting pedestrians at the heart of the safety among our transportation veins. So, so there's, again, long-term, but what we can do short-term as well. And, that's so, because that is my ward. So, and I get a lot of people talking about, Mountain View. There was those the flashing yield sign that for people that are crossing, that was put in. There were other ones where we had traffic studies done that determined, okay, well, maybe that won't be beneficial there, but maybe a four-way stop or something different.
Right.
So, but I'd like to connect with you to make sure that something gets done in that area.
And also the speed limit on 11, I don't know why it's 30 in a residential neighborhood, but people tend to go 35, and that's fast to go through a neighborhood.
And it seems like some of these too are very outdated, especially in older neighborhoods where we need to reevaluate. Is that the best approach for the number of houses in that certain area or what it's used for? So that, there's just a lot of, we have to take care of our older communities, our little barrios. But so, and then we have one more over here, and then we're at 10 o'clock. So
I'll be quick.
yes.
All of this is fine and dandy, but I don't see Longmont taking care of what Longmont had from years ago. We're 80 years old. We walk a lot. The roads in some places are a mess. Sidewalks are, you have to step up. I remind them, don't trip. And then as far as safety, thank you. For people our age, we walk all over Longmont. And we were over on Ken Pratt and 3rd. 4 cars went and the walk light is on. 2 months ago, 3 cars went. The last one was a police car right in front of us. And you stand there, because we like to walk over where those new apartments are, behind there, just looking around. And the little islands there are just, because people have hit them so much, they're falling apart. And I went to him, this is not a safe place to, even stand to get across this street. And then we went around the apartments and over where, I don't know what it is, the vacant land is to the west.
Where the dump
It's a
for the
dump.
sugar mill was.
It's a dump now. People are driving in there and dumping couches and trash all over. It's just turned into a.
Did you want to speak to that? Oh, okay. Go ahead.
My name is Jack Brandon, and I live County Road.
Oh, I'm
8.
sorry. I thought you were. I thought you were going to
That was
answer
getting
her
close to
question.
the end.
Oh,
so-
okay. So I don't know. Did you want to? I think I did speak to that a little bit earlier
Yeah,
as far
this
as
has been brought up before.
yeah,
This is
and
nothing
getting.
No, you don't have to answer.
Okay.
It was more of a statement than a question.
It was more of a statement than a question. I was trying to encapsulate.
There's a gentleman right in the back has raised his hand a couple times, and we'll come back to
We'll go to
Jeff.
you and then.
My name is Larry Brittingham. I live over County Line and 9th, and I sort of have a question which might lead into more discussion, but I was wondering if we know if Fox Hill is going to provide the fireworks this year on the 4th of July.
Yeah, I think so. Kiwanis, yeah. I think they're still, I think the Kiwanians and Fox Hill are still working together.
I'm excited for it. I love planes. I love fireworks. It brings sort of a negative side effect to our community. I live near those beautiful fields that have not yet been developed into parks or schools. And with what happened in Superior, we're a little concerned. So I just wonder if there's any other mitigation factors that might be introduced in the neighborhood. Because what we've seen is we've actually sometimes tried to go away to a hotel, take our dog. There's so many dogs in the neighborhood. And even that hasn't worked because we came home and we found bottle rockets on our porch and things like that. So that field just invites people to come, park, watch the things, and then they trip to the field and keep lighting fireworks for all hours.
I can relate. I live a few hundred yards.
So if there's anything we could do or ask, I remember when they were moved from the Boulder County Fairgrounds over to Entrado, and they made it so you couldn't park around Entrado. And so I don't know, there's no total answer.
Yeah, I know that Boulder County had some impact as to why we couldn't have it at Boulder County Fairgrounds, but Harold has some backstory as well.
Yeah, so originally in COVID, because of the gathering piece, they weren't letting them use the fairgrounds area because they actually lighted, or they were igniting the fireworks in the parking lot off the bottom, and they had to block these other areas. So that then shifted it to where the Kiwanis then moved to Fox Hill. We've talked to them about some other options. I think this year they're going to stay at Fox Hill. In terms of the fireworks issue, when you said how can people help, we asked for volunteers last year to help staff a call center to assist with the number of calls that we have coming in. So we do put more officers on the street. We put more the fire trucks are moving around. But the big issue we have is the inundation of calls into our 911 system. So that worked better this year in terms of allowing us to deal with this issue. One of the things we're talking about is how do we work with neighborhood associations and different groups. And so Carmen and I are talking about how we engage NGLA, because the more that neighborhood associations can assist in terms of maybe you come up with something that you're doing in your neighborhood that allows a mitigation. Definitely say, give us a call, the number I gave earlier. Call that, we'll connect you with the right person in terms of everything that's going on. And if you're interested in helping, we can use it because we get thousands of calls and so we have some options. We also ask people to put signs up. So Marika worked to create a number of signs that say, I'm a veteran. We
did that. That seemed to just spur.
Yeah, so that's where we need to kind of talk and we can work with. But yeah, give us a call, we'll connect you to the right person.
Could you give the phone number again, please?
The easy answer is if you just look at the city manager's office phone number, but it's 303-651-8601. Again, ask for Erica, she'll talk to me, and then we'll connect you to the right person. I think it's Carmen's group. Yeah, it's Carmen, but we'll connect you to the right group.
Thank you.
So, in the scheme of things, we thought this was such a small problem with everything that we heard here this morning. So
It's, for us, it's not a small problem.
Not around the 4th of July, it's not a small problem.
So I did acknowledge this gentleman, so I'm gonna, list you and then
I
we'll wrap
live
up.
up at County Road 80 next to Button Rock Preserve, and I'd just like to say your management up there is damaging my neighborhood. And it's just bad decisions. The last 5 years y'all have caused all the problems up there. And the manager, your parks and natural resources, you're endangering lives up there. I mean, it's malicious disregard of life, putting a parking lot where you're going to force people to walk down. It's just terrible, man. Please change it to the water department. They were fair up there and decent, but your parks and natural resources are just terrible.
All right, noted. All right, I see Shaquille she was just raising his hand real quick.
So I wanted to suggest a solution to some of the problems that we've been talking about today related to traffic safety. And this is something that I brought up in front of council before, but I haven't seen any action on yet. And this is related to the incident with Anthony O'Meal at Pratt and 3rd, but also the issues at 3rd and Hover. There's a lot of residents who have the capability to identify problems with certain intersections and how traffic is managed at those intersections. And a lot of those problems are really related to traffic design and how we design our roads and the assumptions behind those roads and who the priority users are and how different users in different modalities interact with each other. Along with Vision Zero, there's a practice that was used in Jersey City that is becoming more popular across the United States called tactical urbanism, where instead of doing really expensive and long traffic studies in order to be able to facilitate changes at an intersection, you just do something, right? You put out barrels, you put out temporary dividers in order to see how that changes the traffic patterns and if it meets people's needs. And then if it works, then you'd do permanent construction and stuff.
So you prototype, test, iterate.
Yes, exactly.
Repeat. Yeah.
And it facilitates data collection and faster decision making. And I think it also helps because it allows people to feel like their government is being responsive. And I think that's a real challenge here. I think a lot of the buildup of the frustration that residents have is because they ask for changes, and the city has a multi-year process in order to do some of this stuff.
It takes a long time.
And so it doesn't feel like the city is doing anything, even though the city is doing things.
Well, let me just add yes to what you just said. Tom made reference to NGLA, the Neighborhood Group Leaders Association. So whether you're in an HOA but you have to have an organized neighborhood. I could give you examples of neighborhood improvement grants focused specifically on quieting traffic in their neighborhood, especially in the historic Old Town East Side. So there are resources available today through NGLA as part of our neighborhood improvement program that have actually not enabled, funded that kind of iteration, that kind of experimentation, iteration, testing, and then recycle or reiteration to go to scale if things are working. So those options are there right now.
The challenge with that process is that you have to go through a whole approval process and you have to go get a grant. It significantly increases the barriers of actually taking action. And if you live in a part of town that doesn't have an HOA, and I actually bought where I did because I don't want an HOA, I don't have access to those funds. It would be great if there was some way that the city could change the rules so that a group of interested people could say, this intersection is a problem, I have an idea to fix it, traffic department, sign off on my proposed changes, all right, I'm gonna go get a bunch of volunteers to go do some good work.
All right. Thank you all for being here today.